right, guys. Super excited. Can't wait. I know this is going to be a 30 to 60 minute segment. I'm hoping it's closer to 30.
Yes, we're going for it.
But it is one of my favorites, and I'm going to hand the reins over to Cowboy Jack and Kevin Lyon. They're going to give us some hazy history, so let's do it.
All right. Tonight's episode is called Here Comes the Judge, Jury, and Executioner, Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis. But before we start talk about him, I got to talk about his father, Abraham. All right, you ready? There he is right there. This guy here, I don't know about this photo, but he's a 41-year-old doctor who volunteers to join the Union Army for the Civil War as an assistant surgeon. All right? He joined because of his patriotism. Take that, so-called Sergeant Slaughter. Gosh. And for the cause of abolishing slavery, which is foreshadowing a topic involving his son decades later. Anyways, Dr. Landis and Dr. Charles Wright.
Doctor of Pimpology, Charles Wright, dude. Comma, the ultimate fighting machine.
Yeah, the Godfather, you know. But they were actually captured by the Confederate Army. These guys were real men, Jack and Michael. They stayed to treat the wounded at the hospital while other sissy doctors and nurses, okay, including me too, all right, to be fair, abandoned their post and my post when the Confederates came. They eventually did get released in an exchange between the two armies. Unfortunately, though, in a battle at Kenesaw Mountain, Georgia, a ricocheting cannonball that was initially aimed at me ended up hitting Dr. Landis and broke his leg, and Dr. Landis' time serving his country was done. He ended back in his hometown of Millville, Ohio, and he had a son born November 20th, 1866, which he named Kenesaw Mountain Landis after that moment in his life, which apparently the family wasn't keen on the name. You know, so, and he had several children, and the next generation of Landis family was very successful, including 2 sons who served in Congress. And our main topic for today, Kenesaw Mountain Landis. And when you look later, Kenesaw is actually spelled with 1 N when the city in Georgia is actually spelled with 2 N's. So, you know, I'm going to blame the hospital for this. I cannot blame the good doctor here, Dr. Abraham Landis. Cheers to the doctor.
Well, old Kenesaw went on to become a lawyer, and then eventually he became a federal judge in 1905. He had murals of King John conceding the Magna Carta in his courtroom, and he also had a mural of Moses and the 10 Commandments. So much for separation of church and state, boys. Judge Landis believed that he was an infallible purveyor of justice. He acted as if he had absolute power and insisted on complete obedience from anyone in his court. There is one case in particular that not only raises my blood pressure to levels that make my doctor scared for my life, but also demonstrates, in my humble opinion, of course, Landis being a low-down, dirty hypocrite with only his own interests in mind. So Landis, pictured here, seeing an interracial couple get married. In 1914, professional baseball was controlled by 2 leagues, the American League and the National League. But a new upstart league formed to try to give an alternative. It was known as the Federal League. They challenged the status quo, trying to give players another place to play, just basically going up against the big 2. And it wasn't received very well. As the saying goes, you can't fight City Hall, and eventually the American and National League interfered in the operations of the Federal League, causing it to fold in 1915. The Federal League brought a lawsuit against the AL and NL, and just by coincidence, the case was to be presided over by none other than Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis. During the course of the arguments, one of the lawyers referred to the players on the field as labor, to which Landis was mucho offended and interrupted, and he said, I quote, "As a result of 30 years of observation, I am shocked because you call playing baseball labor." So the old stone-faced, unsmiling jerk sat in deliberation of this judgment through spring training, through the entire baseball season that year, even through the World Series. He didn't make a comment. He didn't make a judgment. He did not do his job whatsoever. This man is a lifelong baseball fan, and he didn't make one move. So he did nothing, guys. The case was eventually settled out of court because apparently the wheels of justice turned slower than Rusty Staub riding a Galapagos turtle in a glacier made of molasses.
Wow. Wow, Jack. Hashtag do the research.
Rusty Staub is officially known as the slowest player in professional baseball of all time. Well, this case led to the MLB becoming exempt from the Sherman antitrust laws, which meaning they're exempt from having a monopoly. So the MLB is allowed to have a monopoly on baseball as granted by the federal government of the United States, started by that man right there, Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis. Doesn't sound fair to me, but they have a stranglehold on this thing called baseball that stands to this day. His actions, or lack thereof, on this case show us two things. Landis looked down on the players themselves and did not believe that they deserved to receive their fair share of the money that professional baseball generated, and he openly showed favor to the organized crime family known as the MLB, made up of corporate oligarchs whose vulgar display of greed has slowly caused the erosion of an institution that was once known as America's pastime to something that now rakes in between ultimate slap fighting on TNN. What was Landis's reward for comprising any integrity as a judge that he had by protecting the American and National Leagues? You guessed it, boys. He was appointed as the first commissioner in Major League Baseball.
Shocking.
All right, wait. Whoa. Calm down, Jack. All right? As a direct eyewitness of all this, let me take over, all right?
Right.
So, all right. Baseball's credibility was in question after the 1919 Black Sox scandal broke, all right? You know, have you heard of that? I'm sure most of you have heard of that.
We've heard of it.
All right. So there's those guys right there. And look at that. 8, fix these faces in your memory. Man, it's like Kenesaw wrote that headline. So MLB was looking for a way to restore the damage done to America's pastime. So to quote the National League president, a guy named John Hadler, quote, "We want a man as chairman who will rule with an iron hand or an iron fist," from my beer from earlier. Yeah. Baseball has lacked a hand like that for years. It needs it now worse than ever. Therefore, it is our objective to appoint a big man to lead the new commission. No, not me, unfortunately. But you know what? They thought the perfect fit was going to be Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis. So Landis was known for being very much against these so-called evils of drinking and gambling. Two of my three favorite things. Hey, two of my three favorite things, drinking and gambling. Let me tell you that right now. You know, don't ask. I'm not going to mention what the third is. No, not on the air. So, gambling and gamblers have been directly involved in baseball, but the owners never did anything about it because of fear of it hurting the game. So this definitely changed with the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandal of 8 players being accused of throwing the World Series, but Cowboy Jack Durango, Michael Mondragon, the Baseball Brew Crew Bruniverse, the 8 players were acquitted in a jury trial. How about that, huh?
Yep.
So they're good to go, right?
Yep.
However, Mr. Judge was the jury and the executioner. After he became commissioner, he felt he had to make a strong and decisive statement to stop the amount of gambling in baseball. Here's his quote. "Regardless of the verdict of juries, no player that sits in a conference with a bunch of crooked players and gamblers where the ways and means of throwing games are discussed and does not promptly tell his club about it will ever play professional baseball again." So just like that, Shoeless Joe Jackson and the others were, to quote a John Cusack movie, 8 men out.
Oof.
And Landis, not being a fair and impartial judge, said, quote, "There is absolutely no chance for any of them to creep back into organized baseball." He said, "They will be and remain outlaws," a.k.a. outlaw mudshell baseball players, guys. And Landis was against any effort to reinstate them. So,
even though they were acquitted on the charges, by the way.
Yes, yeah. He was trying to set a point and just stop the bleeding of whatever problems gambling was causing, which I know was plenty. I made a lot of money off gambling on baseball. Sorry, don't talk about that. Anyways, so he didn't waste any time being more of an executioner on the livelihoods of players after he took office, besides deciding on the Black Sox. So the judge, oh gosh, that's so good. Oh gosh, I got the same from earlier. I'm still scared seeing this.
He's battling his fight with his breakfast burrito right there, boys. He's realizing it's not.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm just about to throw that pen at you, Cowboy Jack. Watch out. So the judge executioned 2 players from baseball in his first year in 1921 for even just sitting in on meeting with gamblers. One of them, Eugene Paulette. Come on, these can't be real names here. Also wrote a letter naming 2 other Cardinal players teammates of his, who would be willing to throw a game. The Phillies president got a hold of this letter and sat on it, and apparently knowing that Landis was going to come in power. Oh, here's this letter. Next thing you know, bam, Eugene Paulette is out of baseball. Just like that. And the judge would be firm and petty throughout his tenure. Like, check this one out. In the 1924 season, a Giants outfielder, a guy named Jimmy O'Connell, offered Philly shortstop, I can't say this name without laughing, Heine Sand. He offered this guy $500 if Heine didn't, quote, bear down, do hard against us today, quote unquote. Now, wait a minute, Jack, you have your inflation calculator? What is $500 in 2023 money?
It is approximately $8,747.66.
All right. So Sand hemmed and hawed a little bit, but he snitched in the end to his manager, Art Fletcher, got hold of Landis, and O'Connell didn't deny it. And guess what happened? The judge executioned him from baseball. My favorite, though, I found is a Giants pitcher named Phil Douglas, who was pissed. Oh, no, not that one. Hold on. Go back. You can go back to the next one. I'll get you in a second here. Thank you. So Phil Douglas was pissed at his manager, the little Napoleon, John McGraw, who I'm going to mention again in a minute. He punished Phil for his heavy drinking. So Phil, as revenge, wrote a letter to his friend on the Cardinals named Leslie Mann. Michael, no, not the actress from movies like, hey, one we mentioned last week, Big Daddy. But she is also married to director Judd Apatow. Not that Leslie Mann. So Leslie was suggested he'd be willing to take a bribe to help that the Giants wouldn't win the pennant. But Mann, being a straight-laced, goody, two-shoe snitch, immediately gave the letter to his manager, Michael Mondragon. Do you remember who the manager of the Cardinals was?
Branch Rickey.
That's right, Branch Rickey. And Landis then executed Phil Douglas from baseball. Now you go to the next one. Sure, the judge was petty, but then look at that guy right there. That'd be Ty Cobb. So when you get all-timer, this is what happened. Ty Cobb and another all-timer, Tris Beaker, were accused of throwing a game in 1919 by one of Cobb's teammates, a guy named Dutch Leonard, who said that Ty conspired with him and Speaker's teammate, Smokey Joe Wood. I cannot make these names up. Leonard claimed to have letters to prove this, but Landis did nothing and ruled that Dirty Dutch, not Dutch Chattahoochee, Dirty Dutch Leonard, was driven by a personal grudge. But hey, no one was safe when they went, as even went after the Giants owner, Charles Stoneham, and the man I mentioned earlier, John McGraw. They bought the Oriental Park racetrack in. Why don't you take a guess? Where's the Oriental Park racetrack, Michael? Where would you think that would be?
Oh, I would think it's not. Yeah? It's not in the U.S., is it?
It's in Havana, Cuba.
Oh,
Havana, Cuba.
Oh.
Havana, Cuba. Exactly where you think the Oriental Park racetrack is.
Sure.
Anyway, those two bought the track, and literally the judge went to them and said, it's either horse racing or baseball. And the track went back up for sale. So he had this pattern. He went pretty hard on the gamblers, even towards, and not Kenny Rogers. Neither Kenny Rogers, by the way. They were both safe. But even toward the end of his tenure, the judge was still given the death penalty. In 1943, he actually banned an owner. He banned the Phillies owner, William T. Cox, for life for betting on games. How about that? And Cox only bought the team a year earlier And Jackson will definitely touch on that later, I'm sure. Overall, though, Landis banned 18 players from baseball for gambling-related offenses. How about that? 18 in the 24-year time span. So I can give Landis credit. I'm sorry, Jack, for making an impact on gambling and cheating in baseball. But to close, let me quote a guy who wrote a biography on him, a guy named David Pietressa. All right, quote, before 1920, if one player approached another player to throw a contest, there was a very good chance he would not be informed upon. Now, there was an excellent chance he would be turned in. Oh, yeah.
Well, hey, guys, during the infancy of professional baseball, unlike wealthy team owners, ball players weren't making a lot of money. So in the off season, they would go on tours where they'd visit smaller cities and towns and play exhibition games to pick up a little extra coin, have some fun, and all the while stay in baseball shape. This was known as barnstorming. So in 1919, a rule was made that players who were in the two players that were in the World Series the year before were not allowed to go on barnstorming tours.
Hey,
but
Jack,
yes, sir.
You said 1919. You mean 1911, right?
Yes, sir. I am sorry. 1911. I apologize.
I just want to make sure we're good on this. Thank you.
Yep. So, but that rule was pretty leniently enforced. I mean, they'd do a good brother little token fine, but they'd let the guys go out and make some money. That is until Landis became commissioner. As I spoke about earlier, Landis was not an advocate for the players and treated them with disdain.
Well, what do you think about he's not showing any disdain in that photo there, though. Look, he's almost happy.
It's all for the cameras, baby. That's show business. We are about to dive into this. After the 1921 World Series, a player with the name of Babe Ruth was looking to capitalize on his popularity among fans by leading a barnstorming team. He asked the Yankees general manager for permission. The GM had no objection, but warned the Babe he needed to get Landis's consent. Well, the Sultan of SWAT made a power play against the old man. And guys, I got to tell you, for all the home runs he hit, for his legacy, him taking a stand against Landis is what I will now most fondly remember about Babe Ruth. What he did is he waited until the day before the first exhibition game to call the commish and ask permission. Landis was heated. He ordered Babe Ruth to come to his office right now and have a meeting with him, to which the Babe responded, "I can't. I got to leave for Buffalo for a game." Landis flipped his lid. He refused to give Babe Ruth permission, but Babe Ruth dug in his heels, and he still went on the tour.
What a worker.
What a worker.
Exactly. What a worker.
So after the phone call, Landis slams it down. He's in an office full of people, and he's quoted as saying, "Who the hell does that big ape think he is? If he goes on that trip, it'll be one of the sorriest things he's ever done." So he's got a vendetta now, boys. Yankees co-owner Colonel Tillinghast Houston, yes,
Colonel,
that's a real name, Colonel Tillinghast Houston, begged Babe Ruth not to go. He begged him. He was at the train station begging the great Bambino, "Please don't go." Bambino looks at him and he says, "Tell the old guy to go jump in a lake," boards his train, and heads to Buffalo for the game. Landis is pissed, so he starts going on the offensive, using all the considerable power that he had to completely undermine this barnstorming tour. He sent out orders barring the team from playing in any major league or minor league park. These guys had to comply, so without having suitable fields to play at, the tour was canceled no less than 2 weeks after it started. He then suspended the King of Crash for 6 months and refused to reinstate him until he had the opportunity to meet with him in person and lay down a 2-hour-long fire and brimstone lecture about the value of obeying authority. Just like he obeyed the authority that he swore to as a judge by not ruling on a case, but I digress. This weak, hateful little man tried to flex on one of the most popular baseball players of all time, and guess who suffered? The fans. The only reason he shut this down was because owners weren't going to get a slice of the pie, and it allowed to continue. And if it was allowed to continue, the players would have realized a lot sooner than they did that they could form a union and start getting the big paydays. As we sit here in the year 2023, a full 102 years after this incident took place, George Herman Ruth has had countless books written about him, countless songs sung about him, and movies made in his honor. And Landis is nothing more than a pimple on the backside of baseball's history.
So let me add, too, in 1922, he actually only played 110 games that year, 35 home runs. So a season back then with 154 games, he could have had another, at least 10 home runs on his grand total. You know what I mean?
Wow.
He could have had almost 730 home runs, arguably, because of this.
Wow.
So thanks, Landis. Thanks a lot. But, Jack, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'm going to mess with your blood pressure potentially here. Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh, that fun.
Yeah. No, yeah, there's Landis finding out that someday we'll have a African-American president.
Well, I'm sorry, Jack, because I love getting the other side of this. So it could be argued that Landis did help improve what we would call the minor league system. Jack, relax. Do we need to do some deep breathing here? All right, we're good. All right, thank you. So up until the 1920s, minor leagues operated completely separately from the major leagues, and minor league players were not always allowed to move up. Major league teams were able to draft players who played 2 consecutive years with the same minor league team. How about that? So Landis was like, I don't like this. He felt that the non-draft leagues could prevent players from advancing as they became more skilled. So he helped to improve the system, quote unquote, to where every minor league would be part of this draft. So equal opportunity for white players. Sorry, Jack. Yeah, we'll get on that in a minute. He also had major league clubs disclose all transactions within their foreign systems. The new rule prevented teams from concealing prospects and ultimately denying them a path to the major leagues. No more kayfabing there, my friends. Let me tell you. But also around this time, Landis also, believe it or not, there was a time where major league teams could not own minor league teams. So Landis lifted that ban in the mid-20s, so now a major league team can own minor league teams again. But shockingly, I'm about to tell you this, the owners took complete advantage of this. They grew power and stockpiled players to keep them from going to another team. It's totally shady promoter stuff here that was keeping major league worthy ball players in the minor leagues. And the judge, boom, wasn't having that. It was his gavel right there. So he made a case for a guy named Fred Bennett. This is a player in the St. Louis Browns system. He went to Landis convinced that he was being kayfabed in their system. Landis agreed and told the St. Louis Browns they could either keep Bennett on their roster for the entire 1931 season, trade him, or release him. The Browns owner, Phil Ball, was so mad he took the commissioner to federal court. And hey, Cowboy Jack Durango, guess what court he actually ended up at?
Was it room 625 in the Chicago Federal Courthouse where Judge Landis used to preside?
How did you know that? You are correct. You are correct, sir. Yes. And shocking, who won the case?
Would it be Kenesaw Mountain Landis?
That's right, sir. The good judge.
Gross.
But you know what? I this is where I'm like, all right, cool. He's helping the players out here, which is it's interesting because there's instances where he's helping the players, not helping the players, helping owners. Here he's not helping the owners. So he also saw the Cardinals, going back to the Cardinals here. He saw the system, which is the mastermind of Branch Rickey. We're bringing him up again, which included, believe it or not, the Cardinals owned multiple teams in the same minor league. How about that? That's crazy. So the judge couldn't stop this system, even though he was hoping to, but he continuously looked at situations of players who felt they were trapped in the minor league system. By the end of the 1930s, Landis had freed nearly 200 minor league players from their deals. So sure, Jack, he freed, or dare I say, I'm going to say it, Jack, emancipated minor league players from a bad situation. But Jack, why don't you tell us about Landis in regard to desegregating baseball?
Well, boys, Kenesaw Mountain Landis as services commissioner from 1920 to 1944, there existed what was called a color line in baseball, which is just another way to say segregation. The color line was an unwritten law but make no mistake, my friends, it was a law. Landis is pictured here throwing a baseball at a hungry African-American child. Kenesaw Mountain Landis maintained
They
that
wouldn't have
color
allowed
line.
that close back then. Come on.
Kenesaw Mountain Landis maintained that color line throughout his time as commissioner, like the self-righteous, underhanded, cowardly bigot that he truly was. He did it by building an impenetrable wall of silence where he suppressed and subverted any acts to desegregate baseball, all the while stating publicly that he had no issue with desegregation. To quote Landis directly, Negroes are not barred from the organized baseball by the commissioner. There is no rule in organized baseball prohibiting their participation and never has been to my knowledge. But it was common practice in the 1920s for major league teams to earn extra money in the offseason and stay in baseball shape by playing teams from the Negro leagues. Mm-hmm. Simple exhibition games in the offseason. Boys are making some coin. Landis was having no part of it, and he put a moratorium on these exhibition games, on segregated exhibition games, because he felt it was an embarrassment because the black teams kept beating the white teams. He felt it was an embarrassment.
Wow.
That doesn't sound like somebody who wanted segregation. So
thank you.
Landis also refused to allow players and managers to even speak about desegregation. In 1942, Brooklyn manager Leo Durango was quoted in a newspaper article saying he would sign African-American players tomorrow if he was allowed to by Landis. So then this dirty, rotten, low-down, dirty, yellow-bellied, egg-sucking dog ordered Durango to publicly deny that he ever made that statement. When Bill Veeck Jr. wanted to buy the Phillies in 1942 from then owner Gary, don't call him Ted, Nugent, he made no secret that he wanted to fill out the wartime roster with players from the Negro leagues, and he told Landis as much. One day later, the National League took control of the team with Landis's approval and sold it out from under the Phillies and to a gentleman we mentioned earlier, William T. Cox. Wow. Landis made zero effort to eliminate this unwritten rule.
All right. As you heard, William T. Cox, the guy they hired, a year later got banned for life for betting on games. But Jack, I got to do a run in here because Alanis Morissette's parents possibly weren't even born or alive yet when World War II started, to think of this irony. Landis begged to FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to keep baseball going, even as some amazing Major League ball players, Ted Williams, Bob Feller, I can go on and on and on. We're not just being drafted, but we're enlisting, volunteering to serve their country after the United States entered World War II. I would know because I was sitting off the sidelines and I wasn't going to serve. But, that's beside the point. And hey, let me quote something about Landis here. So Landis, he wants baseball going, but he don't want those Negro League players. But in true Landis fashion, let me tell you something that he actually said. He wrote that peace would not be possible until, this is gross. You ready? Until, quote, about 15,000 little Himmlers, and Hirohitos were killed.
Wow.
Jack, go on, please, if you can.
Sam Lacey was a very prolific sports writer who happened to be an African-American, and he was a huge advocate to desegregate baseball. He began a campaign of editorials, articles, petitions, advocating for the end of the color barrier, and he began that in the 1930s. He just wanted a meeting. That's all he wanted. He repeatedly asked Landis to allow him to be part of the annual owners meeting, and it took until 1943 for Judge Landis to agree. So we're talking over a decade of petitions, articles, editorials, requests, deny for 13 years until Landis finally decides to let it happen. But Landis doubled down on his underhanded tactics here. Instead of inviting prolific African-American players at the time, such as Larry Doby, Satchel Paige, Roy Campanella, Minnie Minoso, or a plethora of other colored baseball players, Landis instead invited a man by the name of Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was a former college football player, an actor, a singer, African-American, and he just so happened to be a loud and proud communist. Oh. So by using a loud and proud communist in that time period as the keynote speaker on this issue, Landis effectively convinced the lily white conservative team owners that the move to desegregate baseball was nothing more than a communist front. That was in 1943, so it's a good thing Landis died a year later.
So let's talk about there's that right there. So by 1944, we've talked a lot about what's going on with Landis. Many of the owners wanted Landis out, ironically enough, because many referred to him as a czar, not a judge, not a jury or executioner, but a czar. I'm sure the players weren't too thrilled about him either, depending on who the player is. But somehow, believe it or not, he did have the support of the public and the press. So the owners knew by this point that Landis wasn't long for this world, even though you saw the photos of him throughout this show. He looked frail and close to death for decades. They gave him a new 7-year deal thinking, he won't last. Kenesaw died a mere 8 days after he got his contract at the age of 78. Oh, yeah. Wah! But as you can see here, he was voted in the Baseball Hall of Fame in a special election in November of 1944. So let me say how the commissionership has changed this time. For this quote by a New York sports writer named Tom Meany. Shortly for Landis' death, this guy said that if the commissioner were ousted, the man who replaced him would, quote, merely be an employee, and whoever heard of any employee fighting against his bosses. Yep, ever since then, that's been pretty much what the commissioner has been. Key example, I actually wrote Fred in my notes, but it's Rob, so-called Manfred Mann singing do, wah, did-it-dum, did-it-do. So, with Jack, let's take it home by you telling all of us, and I know it's going to be I don't know who it could possibly be, who is the deplorable baseball bum of the month?
Well, it should be pretty obvious at this point, but for those in the cheap seats, the dishonor of being named the deplorable baseball bum of the month is awarded to a power-hungry, bigoted, hypocritical, two-faced, corrupted, elitist scumbag whose soul was bought and paid for on the backs of players and out of the pockets of fans, allowing corporate interests to corrupt this game that we all love so much called baseball. The dishonorable Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis.
Jack, I want to end this on a positive note. You see that award there? That is the MVP award. So now you can finally see how Kenesaw's name was actually spelled with one N. So this award was named to honor Landis from a vote by the baseball writers. Excuse me, I almost vomited in my mouth. A month before Landis died. However, former MVPs Terry Pendleton, Barry Larkin, and Mike Schmidt. So we have two African Americans and a Caucasian gentleman, Mr. Mike Schmidt, expressed concern over Landis' not breaking the color barrier. Thus, his name was removed from the trophy at the end of the 2020 season by a vote of, ironically enough, baseball writers. Wow. So, Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis, Cowboy Jack Durango, and I will see you in
Wow. By the way, we end this, can we just admire Mookie Betts' jacket right here?
Yes.
It's absolutely outstanding. Yes. I want to give special consideration to that as well.
The peacock feather jacket is a baller move, dude. Baller move.
My God. And guys, you who are you, Rip Taylor?
I think I should make confetti.
Guys, that was outstanding. What a comprehensive view of a deplorable man, I don't know how you found any good that he did in baseball or in life, but this guy,
I'm good at that. Oh, just you wait. Just you wait.
And remember, we talked about that. We talked about a lot of these things during our This Day in Baseball history, and to hear it in full context. And if you think about it, there was actually something. That is why they have the Rule 5 draft. Is so teams don't stock up on minor league baseball players. That's why that rule was actually enacted. It's still today. They still have it going today. So teams don't just sit on prospects and stuff like that. Ian, thank you so much. Yeah, that was
thank you.
Cowboy Jack and Kevin nailed it. They do every single time. It's such an awesome retrospective of someone who, again, we see those pictures of him all those pictures. And
I almost found a happy photo of him. That was my goal. If I one photo of him smiling, it was like,
But you guys nailed it. I'm so proud of you. And what a so good. You guys are totally nailed it. I can't say enough about it. I'm beaming. I'm like a proud papa here.
And we didn't go and we didn't go Broadway.
I think we did all right.
I don't know. We're pretty close.
Yeah. You know what? We went along in every segment tonight, so it's all right.
You guys. It was worth every second of it. You guys did absolutely outstanding.